James Bond, he does spy work. James Bond, he drinks martinis. With Lucas and Zack podcast. I realized right away that I started singing the Skyfall theme song.
I know, I was about to this is very eerily similar to a James Bond opening number. Welcome, folks.
Randomly sing Skyfall like on a weekly basis.
It's a pretty great song. Welcome, folks. We're continuing. This is week 4 of 5 of Spy Movie Opener Month, and we're going to talk about the biggest spy franchise of all time, and probably the most important and the most impactful. Although
that's really rude to Spy Kids, but okay.
Although not the best ones. No, not the best ones. Which I think is actually one of the most interesting things to talk about with James Bond is that this is a franchise that has lasted since the 1960s. And even the most diehard Bond fans would argue that maybe 55-60% of them are good. It's an interestingly low hit rate for something that's lasted so long. But before we dig all the way into James Bond, before I explain why we picked Casino Royale as the opener for this franchise over such movies as Dr. No and GoldenEye, let's do a little last Letterboxd movie. Mr. Zack Ford knows exactly what he watched last and is going to tell us about it.
Yeah, so they're going to fuck up the title in classic Zack fashion.
Lucas is going to go Google the title just so...
I'm going to go with I was going to do it wrong. I was going to say It's a Beautiful Day, but it's Such a Beautiful Day. It's Such a Beautiful Day is from 2012 or 2011. Depending, I think the shorts maybe started in 2011, but when he was able to... There's 3 kind of shorts that he combined together into the full-length film in 2012, and they say shorts, but they're more like part 1, part 2, part 3 of the same story of this character named Bob, who is this or Bill, maybe it's Bill. Sorry, this I watched this today and I can't get this straight. Who's a stick figure character who is kind of ruminating on his like normality of his everyday life while also like starting to lose his memory and undergo a lot of different sicknesses and just kind of soul disappearing in this existential, not necessarily a crisis, but a spout of existentialism. It's hard to really know what is like the reality of this character versus the memories of this character versus this existential sphere of ideas. It is a very abstract in a lot of ways. And tonally, I think Don Hertzfeldt, who also has been doing, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his other series that's been running for a while. It's a little more have a sci-fi approach to it, but still he functions in such this kind of bleak territory without any kind of cynicism. He's still very hopeful and optimistic about what it means to be human and what's the future of humanity in a way that it is, I think, very philosophical and thoughtful and intelligent that makes it work. But also, when you look at if you look at a poster, you could be thrown off because I don't want to watch like stick figures and this like very minimalistic animation. But like the drawing itself are minimalistic, but everything he's doing with it, the editing, all the production work they put into it is so experimental and anything but minimalist. There will be shots of real human pictures. The frames will change sizes and it will blur in and out. And there's like the sounds, combining the sounds of the characters with classical music through like meld in such a specific way. Every shot is a choice that he is making for some reason that makes it an interesting watch just for that. And Don Hertzfeldt, I think this movie's a masterpiece. I think he is a very unique filmmaker to animation that I wish people would give a chance, but also I don't ever want to give a chance because I don't need people to tell me that you need to be on drugs to watch his movies, which is a bad take, but I'm sure that's a lot of people will say. Just go into it with a open mind and a real attentive mind to kind of battle with the ideas and to work with his unique style.
Interesting. All right. So, yes, it is a 2012 release as a film. The other thing you were talking about is World of Tomorrow, episodes 1, 2, and 3. That's his other big work.
I haven't seen 3 yet, but I hope they put it together as a complete collection. If they did with this, I imagine they will with that as well. Since he's saying he might do 6 parts of World Tomorrow or something like that. So we'll see.
This has been sitting in my watch list on Letterboxd for a while now because it's just commonly considered one of the best animated movies and something that anyone who likes animation should watch. And in recent years, I've tried to expand my knowledge of animation beyond like the traditional Disney animated, Pixar, DreamWorks, because I think a lot of times, as Americans especially, we get stuck in this mold of focusing on the biggest ones. And so the only outside the U.S. animation really get exposed to or unique animation is like Ghibli, but then after that, people stop getting anything else. So we get major studio animation, and then kind of everything that's unique or interesting is kind of pushed to the side. So I am definitely interested to see this purely on the basis of just like I would like to experience different looks in animation and more unique stuff that is not as mainstream.
I think the issue is many people in Americans treat animation as a genre, as a specific, really as code for kids' films and animated animals, rather than it's not a genre and it's a medium that can be applied to different genres and different audiences. It's just the medium and the approach to telling that story is specific to being animated.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's like where a lot of just like where animation has ended up in the U.S. is that we unfortunately live in a world where if you ask people what animation is, the first 40 movies they're going to name are Disney animated or Pixar, which yes are made for kids. So I think the entire like style gets judged in the same way because of the larger studios, just overpowering the message.
Yeah, and not to make me sound like the gatekeeping asshole or anything, but I do always wonder people who like
Zack does not want women to watch.
Okay, not that kind of gatekeeping, but I always think people that wonder how much when people say they're animation fans, they're actually just fans of children's storytelling and don't actually appreciate animation in the broadest form of what the medium is.
I would say the most animation fans, at least a decent percentage of them, are really claiming to be animation fans while they're really just Disney fans.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, but I don't want to tell them they can't claim themselves animation fans.
I don't.
Be you, but I kind of also do want to tell them that.
I mean, I think it's valid to say with any genre, if you're going to claim fandom of a genre, I think that exploring all the different corners of that genre is part of being like a really hardcore fan of it. You know, if you love classic movies, you don't just watch one kind of classic movies. You go, oh, okay, here's the noirs, and here's the musicals, and here's the screwball comedies, like, and here's the westerns. Like you explore and experience all the different things that are to offer, because that's what helps you be the most fully formed and like well thought out fan of any kind of genre or subgenre.
What'd you watch on Letterboxd in the most recent of times?
Yeah, so I just maybe 30 minutes before we started recording finished Terrence Malick's Badlands for the first time, which is a kind of very small story of Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek's killing spree through the Dakotas in like the 1950s, as the movie's 1970s. It's a very interesting film, especially for people who are more like myself, who are more familiar with 2000s onward Terrence Malick. The Terrence Malick I know is doing stuff like Tree of Life and Song to Song and A New World and even Thin Red Line, which is these like huge, expansive, sweeping, kind of somewhat esoteric visual epics. And in comparison, Badlands is a really kind of cut down version of that. Like, it's obviously he's got talent, but it's so much more of a bare bones story. It's very more personal. It's more character based. Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek are both really good in it. It's much shorter than he usually does. Like, we're now used to 3 hours of Terrence Malick, not 90 minutes. So it's such an interesting, weird look at his career. Like, this is where I believe where he started. And some directors you see make their first movie like PTA, and then every movie after that just follows in kind of a normal progression that you would expect after watching that first movie. But when you watch Terrence Malick's first movie, I don't think you expected him to go as far as he did. And he's continued to evolve his filmmaking style, which I think is just really interesting and really cool to see where it started and then see where it's gone since then.
Well, Badlands is his best movie, so this is a bad take. But
Whoa, what's the bad take? I didn't say anything.
You're
bad
saying
about
that you're very dismissive. You're like bare bones. It's just like a starter piece. You see where he got his like footing.
I really liked it. I'm just saying that in comparison to his 3 hours long movies about like where humanity came from, this is much smaller scale.
This is his. It's not as much of a first film as in because Days of Heaven I still think is more similar to Badlands than is his later films. I think it was that 20 plus year break in between Days of Heaven and Thin Red Line that he got more in his head, and his movies are indulgent. I don't mean that in like a negative way, but they are kind of self-indulgent. They're very much in his own personal manner, and these are a little more, I think, friendly to classic narratives and a little easier for the typical audiences, just because the narrative is linear. There's still all these touchstones that we think with Malick, like voiceover and like sweeping poetic shots of nature. And still some religious undertones. But the story is easier to understand and to follow. And as I said, linear and straight up. You can follow it from the beginning to the end without all that extra poetic images not taking up space, which once again, I don't mean as a negative, but that's what he veered more towards later. He got a little more ethereal in his later films than this. But
yeah, I don't think I even like I must have known somewhere that like he disappeared for some time, because obviously his career has this huge gap in it, but I did not realize he legitimately takes 20 years apart. He does the first two movies and then he takes 20 years and does Thin Red Line. And Thin Red Line to me is his masterpiece, but
once he gets to 2010s, he's like busting out movies.
I know, and he gets to 2010s, he does like Night of Cups and Song to Song and back-to-back years, and it's like, and then
they're all lesser films, which maybe says something.
It is interesting that two of his films that are somewhat considered very mad to bad, Song to Song and Night of Cups, are back to back.
To the Wonder was also really close to that time, I thought, as well, which you probably forgot exists.
Yeah, that's a year after Tree of Life. So like Tree of Life is better, but like he is interesting that. I mean, it may just because some of those movies are shorter than others. Like it's hard to make, Tree of Life is a real
blend together. They just all seem exactly the same. Those three movies.
Yeah,
there's no unique idea really spread throughout those.
Yeah, that's so Terrence Malick's Badlands. Really cool, interesting first effort from a filmmaker.
She's basic, great actress.
She is super unique as like just a visual presence on screen, like. Because like there are some shots where she looks older than her age she's playing, and some shots where she looks younger, and some shots where she like looks really like out of it, like she's not comprehending, and other shots where she looks like she's like totally in it. She's just like a really interesting screen presence.
In a way, it's kind of like how Anya Taylor-Joy has encaptured us all with just a unique look. Like both of them just look like no one else that you've ever seen. A lot of it's in the eyes, but that really creates a lot of presence on the screen.
Yeah, both really, really, really talented people. Let's jump ahead to our discussion of 2006's Casino Royale. We're going to do a plot summary, and then I'll talk about some Bond-related stuff. I'll start the plot summary.
Go for it.
All right, James Bond is not 007 yet. He does not have his qualification yet. He has to kill two people. The beginning of the film features him killing the two people. He becomes a 007. He goes to Africa. He chases down a bomb maker. He has a crazy action sequence, parkour style, up a building that's being built. It is probably the best action sequence in the entire Bond franchise, and is really, really, really impressive. Especially
and the
because
most Bourne-inspired action sequence.
Yes, and also really impressive because one of the big things going into Casino Royale was people saying, "Man, we used too much CGI in the last two Brosnan films. We want to go back to being gritty and real," and that's why they have a actual, legitimate parkour champion. That guy who's the bomb maker is legitimately doing all those stunts like a crazy man, and it absolutely rules. This sequence ends up at an embassy. He kills the bomb maker and blows up the embassy, which causes M, played by Judi Dench, who is one of the few characters who returns. Now, she started as M during the Brosnan race, I believe. I'm gonna make a guess that she came in GoldenEye, but I'm gonna just double check that to admonish him. We're sort of also getting an introduction to the idea that we've also at this point been introduced to Mr. White, who introduced like some African warlord guy in Uganda to Lashif, who is going to become our villain, but it's sort of hilarious that he's our villain because he's basically just a guy who has money.
And he has asthma. Our big villain should not be that close to passing out and hyperventilating.
Yes. Okay. Judi Dench does first appear in GoldenEye. That is where she originates. So she's the only character who occurs across several eras of Bond for a while. Bond goes after this corrupt Greek guy, and they stop the destruction of a prototype airplane, which Lashif was trying to short that company's stock, which would have made him money. But because they can't do the attack, Bond stops them. Lashif loses a bunch of money, and he has to figure out how to make it back.
A dumb plan, but the movie makes it work. He has to go play poker because he couldn't blow up a plane.
Right. He organizes a crazy Texas Hold'em tournament at the Casino Royale in Montenegro. Bond gets staked into this tournament. They have a crazy thing.
Can we just say that might have been the easier idea than trying to blow up a plane, is just try to win the poker tournament in the first place?
I don't know, man. He would have made a lot more money, a lot easier in one go if he can just blow up this dumb prototype. There's a crazy bunch of sequences. The chief gets attacked by that warlord guy. Bond has to fight them. The chief tries to poison Bond. Bond survives with the help of Vesper Lynd, who is a British treasure agent.
Played by Eva Green.
Right. Who some people love and I like, but don't understand the
Tim Burton verse loves her. That's where she exists now.
Well, no. There's a weird fan base for her among Bond girls who I don't think she's
good. She's really good in this.
I think she's good. I just don't think she's significantly better than like a lot of others. I
think she's the best of the Craigs.
That's not saying anything. The Craigs movies have terrible Bond girls. They're very like these have great Bond, terrible Bond girls, great support staff, terrible Bond girls. Okay. Bond, then they capture Vesper. Bond chases them. Lashif tortures Bond. Then Lashif gets killed with a bunch of other people, which is very bizarre to kill your villain like 30 minutes left in the film. Bond is injured. He realizes that this guy named Matthews has been working with as a traitor. He transfers the winnings to what he thinks is British. Him and Vesper go off. Bond quits the force, which is kind of a crazy take to do in basically your first movie. And then Bond love. Well, I'm saying in terms of like narratively for your first Bond movie back after a reset, like that is a plot line. It's kind of crazy. And then Bond realizes Vesper Lynd is actually a double agent working against him. He has a crazy sequence. He kills
she's not a double agent.
She is.
She is being blackmailed.
She is a double agent, though. She's officially a double agent. The reason she's being a double agent is she's being blackmailed, but she is a double agent. And then she dies, and Bond hunts down Mr. White and shoots him in the leg and says, "I'm James Bond." And the movie ends, and we go on to have 3 more and soon to be a 4th in the franchise. So let's talk for the biggest thing to talk about here is why did we pick Casino Royale? And I just assumed because you like it more. No, it's actually not that. I think this is the actual truest introduction of the character. So in all the other movies, including Dr. No, he starts as a 007. This is the only movie where you see him become a 007. In every other introduction movie, for Connery, for Moore, for Lazenby, for Dalton, and for Brosnan, he starts the movies as a fully formed character. He's James Bond. Everybody knows who James Bond is. He already has a career. Already has a past. This is the only movie where you really get to see him come into his own.
And it tries to explain his persona through all the other films. So it gives us the development of
in Skyfall.
Is he the Bond we know?
In Skyfall, we go back to his family home. That's something that we've basically never seen in the other films. This one really wants to introduce Bond. And this really does feel like the the influence and partially of something like a Bourne, where the focus on the backstory and the past of the character is really in play. And so then you get into this film and you get a lot of focus on where did Bond come from. Not because in a lot of the other movies, he's just like, oh, he's James Bond. You've heard of James Bond? Of course it's James Bond. Like there's no thought given to like why he's this person or why he's acting the way he is. And so like when it comes down to it, if you go back and look through the history of the character, I think it's really hard to pick any other film in this franchise as the starter. Like Dr. No is the official start first movie, but Dr. No really gives you very little about the character. In fact, he just walks onto screen and is the character. Like there's no attempt to really explain it. More stuff happens in some of the later Connery films, but that's really not it. You know, Lazenby has only one movie. I don't think Moore really does anything to the character. Also, you have a lot of things going on with the 60s and 70s where they're transitioning from Connery to Moore, and they're just acting like they nothing changed. They're acting like it's the same character going forward. Even with like Dalton, you could make an argument for GoldenEye, but even with GoldenEye, Brosnan is clearly a fully formed version of the spy character at the moment. So this is the film where they really do go back to the original and like explain how we get 007. Even like that's such a small sequence, but it's also the first time they've ever explained that. So overall, that's why I was like, we should do Casino Royale rather than some of these other ones, because it's actually I think the earliest. Like if you ranked all the movies chronologically from the age of James Bond in them, this would be the first one. Like this would be the youngest.
He looks the oldest.
Oh, I disagree.
Craig has looked 55 since like he started acting in. Well, I know him, but first from Road to Perdition. He looks 55 in Road to Perdition.
He is a grizzled-looking man, but I don't know if you have watched the Roger Moore films, you will see a 50-year-old man in every single one of them. So, Casino Royale is based on a book by Ian Fleming, who famously based the character James Bond off of the life of Christopher Lee, the actor, who was also a spy during the Second World War. So, in the past, there has been a 1954 television episode where Peter Lorre played Le Chiffre, and a 1967 satirical film where Orson Welles played the Chiefs to David Niven's James Bond. And so they actually fought over the rights to this film for a while. Quentin Tarantino was...
How much does the Peter Sellers Casino Royale have to do with this Casino Royale? Like
nothing.
A story? Nothing.
It's loosely based on the first film. On Peter Casino Royale, the first one, the parody. It's basically a parody of James Bond, and
but the story is not the same. There's no Le Chiffre.
No, there's Le Chiffre. But because they're both based on the same source material, but they treat them just very, very, very differently. So Tarantino was originally interested in doing
that's
this.
Orson Welles. Okay. I didn't get that. That's the one you were talking about.
Yeah, Orson Welles in the 1967 version. And so when they finally get around to doing this movie, they go back to Martin Campbell, who had also directed GoldenEye, which is the first movie in which we see Pierce Brosnan. So they're really kind of going back to their roots. And randomly, I don't know if you know this, but Paul Haggis partly wrote the script and is influential in rewriting the ending so that Vesperlin dies but doesn't actually kill herself. Paul Haggis, famously director of Crash, which is a very weird thing to do, considering.
And this is just coming to me now, but I think the ending kind of botches some of the thematic undertones. I can get to that later, but now that makes sense. That's Haggis, where it's a little too much. I can be not as subtle as he thinks it is, and maybe a little insensitive. And I think in the end, it kind of comes off that way.
Interesting.
Try to say what I'm saying now. So
yeah.
This just came to me. We're talking about. So I think if you have to take the big takeaway about what this movie is saying about Bond and how this develops the character we know of Bond with the death of Vesperlin, and at the end where it's basically like he says, and now I don't trust anybody and something like that. This is basically explaining through the history of James Bond films why he
why his women are
uses women primarily as a sexual object, and really why he hates women. This movie is 2 hours of action to explain why James Bond hates women. And I think Paul Haggis, because I think deals with that in kind of an insensitive manner, really making him seem like an asshole. James Bond like an asshole.
Well, I mean, it's sort of in the character. He's always been
like
an asshole.
Pouty. It's like so simplistic. It's like, no, I can't trust anybody. No.
I mean,
she like try to kill him and was stealing $10 million. And so I get it, but I just don't think he has any kind of gentle touch to Paul Hanks's writing that I think maybe makes that come off a little overblown.
I mean, it's also interesting because one of the biggest critiques when they cast Daniel Craig initially was that everyone's like, this is not James Bond. He's not tall. He's not dark. He's not like suave and handsome. Because if you look at the previous Bonds, they're much like suaver and cooler. And Daniel Craig is a tank. Daniel Craig goes after people.
Looks great. He looks old, but his body looks great.
He's actually not that old in this. I think he's like late 30s.
That's not true, though. He was 65 years old from birth. And he looks like when you see like a grandpa, and then they just happen to wear a tight shirt, and like this grandpa has been running for 150 years, has not stopped. And how is someone like they're never gonna die? That's what Daniel Craig looks like. He looks like the old man that's never gonna die because his body's in too good a shape.
He's a very grizzled person.
His face is just very worn. He has a very worn down face.
Actually, like works amazing in any sequence where like he's kind of taken a beating. He really just nails any sequence where like that character has had to take abuse or has been beat up a little bit, because like he just looks like he can take a metric ton of abuse and just come through it.
Yeah, it kind of works in the like masochistic scene where he keeps just like cheering him on to like, yes.
Oh, he's great in it.
Which is just to get more wax in the testicles. Really caught me off guard. It's kind of goofy that like the whole big climactic torture scene is all about being hit in the balls.
Yeah, but he gets the great line about
I think the sex lines are real bad. I don't need all these sex jokes from him. I think some of the lines are but they're so over the top in this. They're as bad as the anal line in Kingsman, which is supposed to be a joke.
Which is intentionally trying to play off like Roger Moore era Bond stuff. This lack of subtlety at times with Bond is very much built into the character, and it's sort of just like a thing where you either like Bond as a character and like some of the components.
But I feel like they should have got smoother because they rounded out the edges in a lot of ways. Like they grounded it in so much more of an earthly thing, in that Jason Bourne kind of feel, but they still kept these over the top sexual innuendos that don't quite fit in when they're not doing this kind of goofy, more flamboyant mood.
See, I think they always do fit in because I think that the character like is sort of more animalistic in times. I think in some ways the fact that they're less, I think they were being more flashy and like more like class, like, you know, well written. I think would actually work because like he's just.
I think it comes off so much creepier, grosser because I'm treating him as like a real person. Like what is it? Like I want to put my finger in your vagina. Whatever he said.
No. He has a line. It's not even. This is the problem. You think these lines are terrible because you don't remember any of the lines.
It was something about like my finger in you.
No, the line is.
I would scratch your vag. He said I would scratch your vag.
No, the line is you don't know how much I can do with my little finger.
Yeah. That's disgusting.
It's much classier.
I don't think vaginas are gross, and everyone should be willing to put their hands down by vaginas. But just saying this as a sexually romantic line, you don't know I can do my little finger. It's disgusting. It was like gross. No, you don't tell a woman that. He should have been arrested. That's harassment.
He's flirting with her. What are you talking about?
Who flirts like that?
Lots of people.
And that's when they get harassment charges. When they go and TikTok, whatever, fucking Tinder, and you first message you says I want to scratch your vag, you're getting arrested.
That line is okay. They did not say that. The line is, I think, actually quite clever. Like you know how much you can do with my little finger. It's a good line.
I'm really worried about all your romantic and sexual relations.
I worry about you. How did you have a kid? This is not my question. How did you make that happen? You have to write a letter?
Hey, spoiler alert. You don't make kids with their little finger. That's not how it works.
It certainly doesn't hurt.
It does hurt. There's no sperm that comes out of your pinky. Also, why is he just using his pinky?
Why is Zack
really
hating
on technique?
Why are you hating on foreplay? Because that's the question I have.
No, I think it's foreplay shits. He's using his little finger. You gotta be a little more than that.
You don't need to use your whole fist or something, Zach.
Then your pinky. So where's the rest of your hand at that point?
Okay, let's move off this for a second.
Should this be the show I finally said to my mom to watch?
I don't know if we're gonna release this episode. To be honest, we might just cancel this one because you just like went very, very deep into like stuff we did not need to discuss.
I think we should discuss it in every episode. We'll ask all our guests what they think about this line. It's going to be a new segment.
The problem is you keep saying it as, why don't I just scratch your badge? That's not even remotely what the line is.
Why don't I tickle down there with my tiny finger?
I don't think he says tickle. I'm pretty sure he says the line is, you don't know how much I can do with my little finger. It's a line about, it's like, look how talented I am. It's not I'm going to do creepy stuff like tickle people. Let's talk about this film overall.
I feel like we just did. I think we just covered everything.
No, we got to get back to the important stuff. Daniel Craig as Bond, we talked about this in the Bourne episode, is very much influenced by Bourne. From the opening sequence, we have the crazy action sequence to the fighting. One thing you really notice through action sequences in the 2000s is elbows become a really big part of it. The idea of having your hands up near your head and landing elbows and stuff like that. And these more like brutal short shots, which are less flashy and impressive than classic action sequences, but more like brutal and like actually capable of causing damage. I think that's something you see with action franchises. You see that both with Bourne, with Bond, and also even Mission Impossible. Like you start seeing Ethan Hunt doing a lot of these things as well.
Do you think this is inspired specifically by Bourne or more just by the rise of MMA and, fighting arts in general?
See, I think Bourne has a huge impact on this film. I think that the first Bourne comes out roughly the same time as the last Brosnan movie. And if you go watch the Brosnan movie, that's still a vestige of like 1970s Roger Moore. He's got a billion gadgets. They're all kind of goofy looking. They don't make any sense. They're not like cool gadgets, even like Mission Impossible. They're just like gadgets. Like he has like a pen that does random shit, or like he has a boat that turns into a car. He's a car that turns into a boat. Like a lot of stuff is just really silly and goofy. Yeah. And then with this film, what you see is not only are they really focused on like, let's have grounded, realistic, brutal fight sequences. Bond can actually get hurt. That's one of the big things you get from Bourne is like, if you go back to the old Bond films, like Bond would get into like a fight, get like thrown over 10 chairs and get up and like look like he didn't get hit, versus like this one, after some of these fight scenes, Daniel Craig is like almost dying from poison, or like he looks like he's gotten the crap beat out of him. Like he looks like he's taking
a little sweatier.
He's in the hospital and at the end of this film, like he has to like go to the hospital and recuperate. There's even like a scene where like you're from his perspective and like it's all blurry because clearly he's been injured enough that he has to like experience hospital treatment. Like he can't just like do whatever he wants.
And you get to see like bruises on his back or pains on his back at some point too.
There's a couple shots. See, that's the thing. One of the shots is like you get these shots of him walking around shirtless, and it's impressive because he's much more physically impressive than any of the previous Bonds. But also like you get these shots where like he's sitting there and like there's like a huge scar on his shoulder that hasn't healed great. Like you can see the bruising where he's gotten punched and kicked. Like even the sequence where he goes in the bathroom and he's wiping the blood off himself. Like it's not just he has to clean blood off. It's like he takes his shirt off and he has to put bandages on him because he's got huge bruises. Like he's getting hit like a normal person. It's something that I think Bourne is really responsible for, is like this idea that like great spies are just normal people who have extremely large amounts of training. They're not superhuman. They can't take 5 bullets through their shoulder and just walk away. They can't jump off a balcony and be fine. Like if they try to jump across rooftops and like fall, they're going to be bruised up. They might be able to keep running because they've got extra training and they're in better shape than the average person. But they can't just like take a metric ton of beating and suddenly just like be chill.
They have vulnerabilities. And this is the one that makes Bond both emotionally and physically vulnerable.
Yeah, and it makes him more interesting because the character then becomes more of a real person. And it means that relationships for him are more interesting because you can see him actually getting hurt. You can see how he starts relying on people, some people more than others. Like, I think the relationship with M is actually kind of fascinating. I think Judi Dench, first off, is great as M. I think
she has the right level of sass.
I also think the
especially
brilliance.
This one.
I think there's a brilliance to casting Judi Dench as the boss of this sort of misogynistic spy. Like, I think if he had a male boss, it would be much less interesting. But it is really interesting that James Bond is this guy who goes out there and kind of uses women like playthings, but then also simultaneously has this female boss who like takes zero shit from him and is constantly threatening to ground him and like take away his command. I just think she's really great in it, and that relationship between the two and the way it continues to expand throughout, Quantum Solace and then also into Skyfall is, I think, just such an important relationship for the character.
Yeah, because Two Realms of Judi Dench is really this like royal authoritarianism that you can like associate it. She's played many queens. She just seems like this powerfully and maybe royally tied person that works in as the head of an agency. You can respect her as an authority and someone in charge, but also she works as just like this judgmental old British woman that just like judges the lack of virtues of everyone below her. And so tying those together creates that perfect chemistry with Bond, but also believable as the leader.
Well, she's a total leader, but then also there's the great scenes where she's a woman getting a bath. There's like these very classic British scenes. She's making tea. She's getting a bath. She's having English breakfast. Like there's these great comparisons between like the normal person M and then the person who is in charge of this elite force of spies who runs the 007 program. Is the head of MI6. Has all these people who are, reporting to her and, is just clearly in charge at every single moment of the film.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. We like Craig. I think Craig is really good. I think physically also, I think that's the most important thing for him is that he physically seems capable of all the stuff, whether it's the parkour race or the shooting or the fighting. He has this real physicality to him that sometimes previous Bonds have lacked. Like if you go watch Roger Moore films, it's really hard to watch them as a modern day person because you don't for a second believe this person can actually fight and kill people. You totally are believing that Daniel Craig's James Bond could go into a room and beat somebody up in a bathroom and then shoot you. There's this it's not evil, but he has this coldness to him. Like you can see the calculating killer inside him, but also he just like he physically gets into fight sequences and you just see the physical capabilities.
I think in the later films, sometimes he can rely so much on that physical demeanor that his charm kind of disappears because I think he can be kind of a dry actor, especially outside of the Bond franchise. I think this is where I'm going to not defend because I don't think you're a hater, but Vesper. I'm blanking on her name now, so I'm just going to say it.
Vesper.
Eva Green. I was going to say Alice Eve, who's a different person. Eva Green, this is to say that I do think she's pretty great in this movie because I think this is the one where Craig's charm is the best, primarily because I think the chemistry that he can work with Eva Green that he can never recreate with another actress. That's why she's the best Bond girl there because that's maybe the only one he can really connect to. I just don't think chemistry and charm is Craig's strong suit. But it works in this movie for sure. I think he comes off very charming. It gets a little dragged later.
Well, I think also this is the film where he is a little bit more he believes he still has this belief in like love and this potential for these actual like real life stuff. You get into other ones. You get into like Skyfall, and he's a very clearly traumatized person, both physically and mentally. And I think part of it is that the death of Vesper really plays into like where the character goes. Which is kind of interesting. It's an interesting thing to talk about because I think on rewatch, she is sort of just the character that exists so that Bond can have a reason going forward. Like her purpose.
It's same thing with Bourne and same thing they use Franca Potente.
Yeah. But I mean, but in some ways, her entire purpose in this film is to lead. Like weirdly, I don't think you would have known this watching this movie the first time without having seen the others, but she's the character that kind of ties this movie to the other ones. Like she's the reason that they start going after Spectre and Mr. White and Dominic Green in the second one and then Silva in the third one, and the reason that he then starts acting more like the James Bond of like classical James Bond lore where he's kind of aloof and set away from people. Her character is in some ways very much just a plot device. I mean, she's good as the character. I'm not gonna disparage Eva Green, but I do think in some ways her character on rewatch, her role in the film really comes into focus as like she is the plot device tying these films to where they go in future ones, rather than being as important of a character in her own story.
Her purpose is where Bond went technically for the whole franchise. It is an explanation of who he is, so it makes it kind of a big character, an important character.
Oh yeah,
that changes his whole dynamic and persona.
Well, he's also hunts down the people who blackmailed her for basically the next three films.
Yeah, she's still smart and very active and, facilitates a lot of the plot. She's not an active. I don't think she's purely there to be fridged and to deliver. She's still very active in what happens within this movie.
No, I'd agree. She's interesting, and I think the biggest difference between her and the other Bond girls of the Craig era is that she's the only one outside of maybe Léa Seydoux in Spectre who's actually given like in any way a plot device. Like, I mean, I guess Olga Kurylenko is given some stuff in Quantum of Solace. I mean, and then you started getting into.
I can't remember some of the actresses in the other ones.
Well, then you get into the weird thing where, like, is the Bond girl in Skyfall Naomi Harris as Moneypenny, or is it like some other woman in this? Because there are the people in that film.
Moneypenny's just a different character that exists in the franchise and can't be really considered a Bond girl. Like, you don't consider Emma Bond girl. She has a different purpose.
No, but he also doesn't sleep with them.
Does he sleep with Moneypenny? I don't remember this.
Yes, he sleeps with her. Like, he sleeps with her more in the modern franchise. In the older ones, she's always sort of in love with him, and he's like, "You're this weird secretary person who's not hot, and I want to go sleep with the hot people." Yeah. So, they just don't really have as many functional Bond girls as they go along. In some ways, they give the villains larger roles and then cut down on the roles of the Bond girls as they go forward. Although it'll be interesting to see. I think Léa Seydoux, Dr. Madeline Swan, is returning for No Time to Die. So we'll see like how much of a role she gets in the new one.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Mads Mikkelsen, who is at this point in his career, I believe, basically his first American language role. Like, I think this is sort of the thing that brings him.
Really kicked him off. Really got him a lot to work with in Hollywood. Because I think he's done some Thomas Vinterberg movies before this. At least Celebration, I think.
He did 2 Nicholas Winding Refn films. He did.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Lone Sherfig. He did a Suzanne Bear. He was in King Arthur, Antoine Fuqua's film. He was in Pusher 1 and 2 with Nicholas Winding Refn. He's hilariously in the Danish dubs of Monsters Inc. and Cars. But
oh my gosh, I need to watch those right now. Should we do a month on Thomas or Mads Mikkelsen dubs?
Well, I mean, I don't speak Danish, so that might be a problem. But no, he has not worked with Vinterberg.
You can still watch the subtitles.
He doesn't work with Vinterberg till 2012's The Hunt. But this is basically his first major.
I thought he was in one of the earlier ones. Okay, never mind.
Not showing up in his filmography. But yeah, basically the first major American success that he's in, and he's a little bit in the 2004's Antoine Fuqua's King Arthur, but it looks like he's a very small role. And this is like the first big thing, and sort of kind of sets this weird template for his career, where he is initially viewed as a villain, and then after a while people start realizing, oh, this guy actually is more than just a villain. He's really good in this film. He's just great. He has such a unique look. He has such a unique style, just the way he talks, the way he speaks. His character is a bit nonsense. On rewatch, the more you think about it, this idea is this guy who just is a banker who works with terrorists and is great at math, and then like tries to short markets and make money for terrorists, so terrorists can have money and they don't have to carry it around with them. Like, it's a
real threat. The primarily threatening thing about him is his bloody face. But he's kind of he was definitely like a nerdy schoolboy with asthma that just wanted to like show everyone how big his dick was, so he became like a famous accountant. He used his math for power.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's like, I think we're some ways used to more to James Bond villains who have more of like a physical threat. And this is not really a character who's particularly physically threatening. He's not somebody that necessarily, scares you that much. Like, he has like torture sequences with James Bond, but it's not necessarily like, even those sequences, he comes across as like somewhat threatening, but not even that threatening.
No, because he's hitting the balls. It's just silly. It's not that scary.
Well, it's not even just that. It's like he doesn't seem like, oh, this is the first step, and then the next step is to start pulling fingernails, and the next step after that is to rip your. Tell you, in some ways, he's like, his torture is almost just slight annoyances to Bond, while they try to break Bond by actually, pretending to torture Vesper Lind.
Yeah, but it still works because Mads Mikkelsen is just like naturally intimidating with his face and his demeanor. So even though, like, plot-wise and the way the character's designed, it's not very tense or intimidating, or you feel like a threat. But when you look at Mads Mikkelsen, you're always going to feel like he's a threat.
Which is hilarious, because then he can also simultaneously channel that and do, like, Danish movies where he's, like, a teacher, and you totally believe him as, like, just a nice teacher who likes everybody.
It's like he's a great actor or something.
He is very, very, very talented. This is such an interesting film, too, because, like, in comparison to previous Bond films, it has so much of a smaller supporting cast for James Bond. There's no Q. There's no real like support staff. There's no Moneypenny in this one. Like you have Judi Dench's M, her
they had in Jeffrey Wright for really no purpose, and he does not come back, right?
No, he does. He does.
Oh, he does. Okay, because he's in this movie so much less than I remembered.
Well, that's because Felix Leiter is a classical James Bond character. He's been around in a bunch of different films, and he features in Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and he's also going to return in No Time to Die.
Okay, so they bring him instead of having the Moneypenny in the queue.
Well, I mean, not really, because he's existed in films with the Moneypenny and Q. He's the American counterpart. He's not necessarily an ally. Judi Dench has Tobias Menzies playing her chief of staff. They would then go on to replace him with Bill Tanner, played by what's his name, Rory Kiernan, in the later films, who's really good. But like this is just a much more cut down version, much more smaller version. Like this film starts and basically James Bond goes off, blows stuff up, goes back to base once, and then basically is hunting down Le Chiffre for the rest of the film. Like he has very little interaction with the MI6 headquarters. The film is interesting too because it's a film where like the villain poses almost no threat to MI6 or the British government. Like it has very little to do with them. So in some ways, MI6 is hunting down a guy who poses almost no threat to their government or to their way of life, which is very different.
He's in like assisting terrorists though. So they're doing something productive.
No, I'm not saying it's not productive. I'm saying that this is a film where he is chasing down somebody who has nothing to do with the actual British government. Like they usually have a bigger impact or the British government who gets a bigger stake in the stuff that James Bond is doing.
It just opens up the world of Spectre essentially to create the bigger picture of the impact towards MI7 and everything else. That they had the counter organization that's pulling all the strings.
Do you think when they created this movie and they wrote it that they knew where they were going with Mr. White and Le Chiffre in future films?
They definitely knew that was Spectre controlling them, right? Because that's what they give to me hints for a couple movies on like, oh, he's not even the big bad. Because they like say that we got to find out who's actually pouring in. It takes until Spectre to really get to what's his face,
Blofeld. Yes.
Yeah. It
is interesting though, because part of me feels
like it up, right? That is who's in charge of achievements, right? You're supposed to believe it's Blofeld.
This is all revealed in Spectre that Le Chiffre and then Dominic Green from Quantum of Solace and then Silva from Skyfall are all pawns in a game played by Blofeld.
It was definitely a plan. I mean, you don't start a like new grouping of Bond films without a plan to have Blofeld because he's so tied to the franchise.
Here's the thing, though. I think they did have a plan. I think the plan was very minimal, at least in the first couple ones, because if you watch these first two movies, like the characters are there, but there's almost no actual hint to the larger problem. Like there's small hints, but it's harder to follow them. And in sort of the problem at times with Spectre, and I'm not going to talk deeply about Spectre, is that Spectre is then asked to tie three films together that are maybe not as closely together as they would have liked when they had to make that film.
Yeah, because the tie in this comes off mainly as like a MCU mid-credit scene. That's like just ties, future films, there's actually a bigger monster at play to come, and that's like it. It just ties together just by hitting someone else was involved.
It's literally two moments. It's like, why did they who killed Le Chiffre and everyone there? And then he hunts down Mr. White at the end. And that's like literally all the stuff that ties to the future films. It is interesting that they used so few characters from previous films in this. Like, basically, the only characters who have appeared in previous Bond films are Bond, M, and Felix Leiter. And then basically everyone else is either a new character or just like a one-off character that doesn't really matter that much. Just it's too interesting to me that they really tried to make this movie about James Bond. I think that's because
it's the origin story, and so they can use the rest of the sequels to promote it in a way. But guess what? This is the movie where Q comes in, so people get excited for it. So just to slowly bring out this world and these characters, rather than showing all your cards in the first movie.
Yeah, no, I just think it's really interesting that they really tried to make this is the James Bond origin movie. We want to introduce you to this character and his thing and his story. And the way we're going to do that is making sure that we don't just have a bunch of other characters in this film that you're going to notice and then focus on other stuff. It's in some ways it's very like restrained and very smart I think a lot of credit has to be given to Martin Campbell, the director, who, has worked in this universe before and has like an understanding of James Bond. And I think that's why you get what is a cool reinvention of the franchise while still maintaining a lot of the James Bond you've seen before. So like, while Craig is definitely different from somebody like Brosnan, he's more of a brutal fighter. He's more rugged. He's more violent, and he's more physical. But there's still enough stuff there that you're not going to watch you're not going to watch Casino Royale and then this Casino Royale and a Brosnan one and be like, these are completely different characters. There's still like vestiges of the old character that still exist.
It's a transitional piece. And so maybe having Campbell for the transition, is smart before they go, more altruistic in a way with having Sam Mendes, who has a little more of a artsier touch.
You're forgetting the wonderful experience they stopped
before that.
Thank you. And did Mark Forster, which is one of the weirder Bond director choices, at least of the modern era, because he's just not somebody who's particularly well acclaimed. He just has a career.
I can't think of what he did. Didn't he was doing World War Z and got pulled off it or something?
He did Monsters Ball, Finding Neverland, Stranger Than Fiction, The Kite Runner, and then he did that, and then he did Quantum of Solace, and then he did World War Z.
Oh, he did. I thought Francis Lawrence had something to do with that. He might have.
That may have happened. Potentially. Yeah, there was rewrites and stuff on it. Other stuff happened. Is there anything else to talk about with James Bond? We kind of talked about the character. We talked about the origin, how Bourne influences this. But it's still very much a franchise. I think in some ways that's the smartest thing about this movie is that it's clearly taking the influences of Bourne and seeing what's popular at this era to like readapt this to a new era, so it doesn't feel like an outdated Bond, but also like it doesn't become a Bourne movie, which I think I think is good. Like it figures out what to take from stuff that's come before and been successful without just turning a Bond movie into a Bourne movie, which also I don't think would work.
Yeah, I think it took primarily how to develop the character in a more vulnerable way from Bourne, but then there's still style of it is still a little more to the Bond, and the tech and the sexuality is very different. That's still in the Bond world.
Yeah, and then they go on. Yeah, go on.
Oh, this is my last thing that we should talk about when we talk about a Bond film is what do you think of the Chris Cornell song? Because I actually kind of dig it. I think it's really good. It does not get talked about. I think it's pretty good.
Top 5 Bond songs. It's so good. I think it rules. Really hard.
Oh my gosh! Why am I blinking on the best song?
What?
What's the movie in Japan from 1967?
Oh, You Only Live Twice.
Thank you. You Only Live Twice is easy and far away. The Nancy Sinatra song is the best Bond song. It's so good.
No, it's not.
It's so good. It's so great.
It's okay. It's good. It's not the best. It's not the best.
Because you have modern takes and modern tastes, and you don't appreciate the stylings of Nancy Sinatra.
Zach, I've seen more Bond movies than you. I don't think the Nancy Sinatra's one. I will say the really great ones. I love the Chris Cornell. I love Adele's one. Those are the 2 modern ones. Actually, it's hilarious. Like in the Daniel Craig ones, the first and the third ones are really good. Quantum of Solace and Spectre have pretty objectively bad to pretty nothing songs.
I remember really liking the Jack White, Alicia Keys one when I saw it in theaters. I haven't heard it since. But then I was like, why do people hate on this? I dig it.
It's totally forgettable. Let's talk about some of the best Bond songs because you've just. I do like Goldfinger. Shirley Bassey is great. That's a really good one.
And you have Live and Let Die as Paul McCartney, and it's a kind of a classic rock song at this point.
It's a very good one. You Only Twice is good. I like Adele. Diamonds Are
rules.
Shirley Bassey has 2. Diamonds Are Forever is also really good.
What's the Octopussy song? Do they go Octopussy? Octopussy?
I actually don't remember.
Do they say Octopussy?
I don't think so. Some of them don't. Like this one doesn't use the word Casino Royale in the title. Like sometimes if the title makes sense,
so I changed my mind. It's a bad song. It doesn't say the title. The song sucks.
Then there's some really bad Bond songs too. Didn't like Madonna. I think the Madonna one is pretty terrible. Die Another Day. That's pretty trash.
I think you have to say the title because then, like every time someone says Skyfall, talking about the movie, I have to go Skyfall.
See, here's the thing.
Words.
Here's the thing, though. I actually think it's really smart to only use the name if it works. Like you can say Live and Let Die, or you can say Goldfinger, or you can even say Skyfall or Diamonds Are Forever.
You can say Casino Royale. Casino, not in the Casino Royale.
But Casino Royale is basically just a place.
So Lucas just died and disappeared from the screen, and I do not know how to end the show. Will he be back? Will he not be back? Who knows? But since I have last word, and this may not be recorded because who knows how technology works when he signs out of the show. Last word. It's Sasha rules, and nothing Lucas says matters.
No, she's not the best, but she is very good. I give her credit on that. I was okay. So my biggest thing I was thinking about this. I watched all of the Craig ones in preparation for this because I wanted to think about the entire franchise as a whole. And I think what's one of the most interesting things about Craig is he's commonly considered one of the best Bonds, up there usually with Connery. But like at a hit ratio, he's maybe like 50% or like slightly above 50%, depending on like if you like Spectre. I think I liked Spectre on rewatch. I didn't like on previous watch. So it's just interesting coming into this fifth movie. Like No Time to Die is kind of really important for his career, like for like his legacy as Bond, because if No Time to Die is not good, like he is arguably a James Bond who does not have 50%, who has less than 50% good movies, and like the only other Bond that really falls in that area is Roger Moore, who's commonly considered like not great, So like it's just, to me, it's interesting to see like what happens with No Time to Die, and like how good is that movie. I also think it's interesting as you go on to the franchise, you get sometimes inconsistent results. Like you get a worse villain in Quantum of Solace, but then sort of a better villain in Skyfall. You also get the introduction of more and more supporting characters. I really, really like Rory Kinnear as Tanner and Ben Whishaw as Q. I think was really good. I also think Ray Fiennes.
I don't know what movie you saw because I definitely saw Paddington Bear as Q, and it is a very interesting use of the bear. It's a great bear.
Isn't it kind of great that he is simultaneously plays Paddington and is also in a James Bond franchise? I think that's kind of awesome.
Yeah,
and also,
they should just do a crossover.
Really good advancement to get what's his name? Ray Fiennes. Great addition. Yeah. I really like Casino Royale. I think I like it more than you. It's one of my favorite two Bond films. I think
I like it. I like it quite a bit. But I just have issues with it. But
I think
I'm not near the Bond fan that you are.
Have you seen them all?
I've not seen them all. I have not seen a movie that did not star either Sean Connery or Daniel Craig.
Ooh, Dalton is really good, and I actually
maybe saw like moments of a Pierce Brosnan movie when I was a kid, but I don't think I've ever seen a whole thing. And
I would say to people who are maybe not big Fonz fans, I would say Craig is a great place to start because it's kind of more modern. I also think that if you want to go back to the older ones, I think the two Daltons are kind of fun and really good, and kind of darker and more like Craig, so you might like that. I love On Your Majesty's Secret Service, which is the only Lazenby appearance, which features the best Bond girl of all time, the wonderful Diana Rigg. And, Brosnan is pretty good. If you don't know if you're going to like Bond, yeah, I would skip Roger Moore. He's not very enjoyable and kind of ridiculous and, just is frustrating at times with his, he just looks like he's going to get beat up in every scene. Like, he looks like somebody's like the bully's going to come take his lunch money, and it's a weird look for James Bond.
So I've seen the first 6.
Okay.
And then I've seen all the Craigs.
That's not a terrible group to watch. First 6 are not bad. I like Russia with Love a lot. Goldfinger's really good. Do you have any final thoughts on the wonderful world of Casino Royale?
No, I enjoyed it a lot. I will say I was unfair the first time because I probably didn't give it attention because turns out when you pay attention to movies, they're always going to be better.
Yeah, especially a James Bond movie, because if you don't pay attention to this movie, you're going to watch 20 minutes and be like, I have no idea what happened, but we just changed. We just jumped 3 different countries.
We didn't talk about poker at all, but I think that might be a sign that the poker is kind of just a plot device and they don't do much interesting stuff with it.
No, I think it's good poker scenes, but I don't think the poker is the important thing that's happening.
No, it's an atmosphere. It's just for the environment of a poker table.
It's a power play between the Chief and Bond.
But it's a pretty simplified idea of poker. They it's like poker for dummies, where the Chief is like, it's all about the math, and Daniel Craig is like, it's all about knowing your enemy, and it's just like the most simplistic terms you can use to teach someone what poker is about. But it's fine. The movie doesn't need to be a poker movie.
Yeah, I mean, also, I think if you made it a poker movie, then it would get real boring in the middle because I think that's not what this movie wants to be. All right, we talked Casino Royale. Next week, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about Kingsman: The Secret Service, which is sort of a action movie, comic book movie parody, at least in a lot of essences, trying to parody the 1970s Roger Moore films with Taron Egerton. And that should be a good time. And yeah, you guys got to see some reviews from us. That's been fun. And we'll have more reviews and more regularly scheduled content coming soon.
We
like
love
the video.
you and we think about you.
Absolutely. Like the video, subscribe, drop us comments, tell us thoughts. We love hearing them. And we will see you next week. Peace out.
James Bond, make me tumble, Lucas and Zack podcast. I can't remember the melody after